a promise remembered. From the moment Daisy first laid her soft brown eyes on her owner, Henry, the world had meaning. She was a small beagle puppy when he brought her home, bundled in a faded plaid blanket that smelled of sawdust and soap. Henry's life had always been quiet. He lived in a little white house on the edge of town, but with Daisy, that silence became warmth. They spent mornings walking through dew-soaked fields, afternoons by the porch where Henry would hum old country tunes, and evenings curled by the fire. Daisy learned every sound of his world, the creak of his boots, the whistle of the kettle, the steady rhythm of his voice reading aloud to her. To Daisy, Henry wasn't just her owner, he was the sun that rose every morning and the reason her tail wagged. When he smiled, her heart knew peace. And every time he whispered, "Good girl," it was as though the world stood still, and only love existed. One morning, Daisy sensed something wrong before the sun even climbed the window. The house smelled still. The air felt heavy. Henry didn't rise, didn't hum, didn't move. She nudged him softly with her nose, whined, licked his hand, waited. But Henry didn't wake up this time. The hours passed, and when strangers finally came, faces she didn't recognize, Daisy barked and barked, confused, desperate to protect her friend. They spoke softly, carried him away, and the sound of the door closing felt like the world breaking. For days, Daisy waited by that door. She refused food. She sat in Henry's old chair, her nose pressed into the flannel shirt draped across it, breathing in what little was left of him. Nights came and went, the silence growing heavier, until one day, Henry's relatives arrived. They didn't speak to her like Henry did, they moved through the house as though it were a burden. When they placed her in the back seat of a car and drove away, Daisy didn't understand. She pressed her face to the window, watching the White House disappear. Her tail drooped. Her heart cracked. The shelter smelled of metal and fear. The cries of other dogs filled the air, a chorus of confusion, pleading, and heartbreak. Daisy didn't bark. She sat quietly in her corner, her tail still, her eyes dull. Volunteers walked by, some cooed softly, some didn't look at her at all. Days turned into weeks. Families came and went, their laughter echoing down the hallway. They looked at younger dogs, the ones that jumped and wagged, but Daisy just lay still, her nose resting on her paws. Every night, she dreamed of Henry's voice calling her name, of the sound of boots on the porch, of a world where she was loved. Whispers began among the volunteers. Daisy was too old, too sad. Maybe no one would come for her. But one volunteer, a young woman named Ellie, saw something different in Daisy's quiet eyes. "She's not broken," Ellie said softly one evening as she brushed Daisy's fur. "She's waiting for someone who understands." One afternoon, as the rain tapped gently against the shelter windows, the phone rang. Ellie answered, and a spark of hope crossed her face. On the other end of the line was Henry's niece, Clara. She had just heard what had happened. "I didn't know they took Daisy there," Clara said, her voice breaking. "Uncle Henry loved that dog more than anything. I'll come for her right away." When Clara arrived, Daisy didn't recognize her at first. But Clara knelt down, tears in her eyes, and held out her hand. She spoke softly, just like Henry used to. "Hey there, sweet girl. You remember me? I used to visit when you were just a pup." Something in her tone stirred Daisy's heart. A flicker of warmth. The smell of home, Henry's scent faintly lingered in Clara's coat. Daisy's tail twitched, then wagged. For the first time in months, she stood up and pressed her head against someone's chest. Clara wrapped her arms around her. "Let's get you home," she whispered. Clara's house was different, but kind. The yard was wide and full of sunlight, and the air smelled of fresh grass and comfort. Daisy hesitated at first. She searched every corner for Henry, but Clara's patience was gentle and endless. Every night, Daisy found herself lying by the fireplace again, her new family close by. Clara often sat beside her, stroking her fur and telling her stories about Henry. "He'd be so happy to know you're safe," she'd whisper. The years rolled on, and Daisy grew older, her muzzle turning grey. Yet her eyes sparkled again. Children played with her, gentle hands fed her treats, and laughter filled her world once more. On summer evenings, Daisy would sit on the porch, feeling the warm breeze, looking out toward the horizon. She often felt as though Henry was there, smiling down, proud that his best friend had found love again. When Daisy's time finally came, she wasn't alone. Clara held her close, whispering, "You were loved. You always will be." Daisy's heart slowed, peaceful. In her last dream, she saw Henry walking through the golden field, smiling, calling her name. And she ran to him, her tail wagging, free at last. After Daisy was gone, Clara planted a small apple tree by the porch. Each spring it bloomed with soft white blossoms, a symbol of renewal and love that never dies. Beneath its branches lay a small stone carved with simple words. "Daisy, a good girl. A loyal heart. Forever loved." Every morning, as the sun rose, Clara would sit by the tree with her coffee, and sometimes, just sometimes, she could swear she heard the soft thump of a tail against the porch floor, keeping time with her heartbeat. Because love, once given, never really leaves. It just finds new ways to stay. The end.